everyone. And Holly and I know it's the afternoon because, as I said to Holly a second ago, I always forget to press this button. I don't know what button it is. So Tim's waiting outside to tell me what it is, and I forgot to press the go live button. But I have definitely pressed it now, so we should be live. And good afternoon, everyone. Once again, we are here for a Tech Educators Career Talk. I've got the thumbs up from Tim, which means we're definitely live. And I'm delighted to be joined by Holly this afternoon. Holly, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Yeah, we've already done this once, haven't we?
It's great to be here.
I know just how super busy you are, so finding the time in your diary, in your day to do this, honestly, we're all just so grateful, and thank you for doing that. And yeah, you've been on a boot camp yourself before, so this is a great opportunity for everyone to go, oh, I can see someone that's actually done a boot camp, not a tech ed boot camp, but a boot camp historically, and gone on into the world. So um Holly, just to sort of kick off, like, what inspired you? Like, how did you go into doing a boot camp? Like, how did that happen? Why a boot camp?
So I was actually in Bali at the time. I was running my own freelance business doing sort of branding and web design. And I kept having to hire developers to do some of the like technical bits for me.
Right.
And I was like, oh, it costs me so much money paying them to like do it. Like I was thinking,
Yeah.
oh, well, maybe I can like learn to do it myself. So I just sort of started looking into it. And then I met someone in Bali who had done one of the boot camps in Lisbon. And it sounded great. I was like, it sounds like such a cool way to learn. I didn't know that it was a way that you could do it. I kind of assumed you just had to go to university. So I was like, oh,
Right.
actually, there's this really like good opportunity here to do it in such a short space of time. So yeah, that was kind of what inspired me, sort of thinking I could definitely do this and not have to pay other people to do my coding for me.
So it was like out of necessity, really. It was kind of
Yeah,
like,
it
no,
was kind of initially. I'm like
no,
fed up of paying people.
and I mean, that's certainly one way to want to go about it. I mean, I will say, and I will caveat that, as I do when I can, it's like, although I founded this company, it's like I actually can't code. So I spent a lot of my time in product management and project management, sort of working with other developers. So it's sort of every now and again I get the opportunity to sort of go, oh, I know what you're talking about, but I actually can't code. And I must admit, even now, it's sort of that thing where I really wish I could, because it's just such a great skill to develop and to run through. So I mean, was it a slow, gradual process of like, I'm thinking about coding, and then no, I'm definitely going to do it, or was it just one day, bang, or because obviously you were involved in that industry right at that time?
Yeah. So it was definitely a bit of a slow process. So when I first started, I just kind of learned a few bits of CSS because I was doing like tweaking things on Squarespace. So I was like,
Yeah.
well, I'll try and change the background color of the button or something, like doing little bits like that. And then as I kind of like wanted to be able to do ever increasingly more complex things, I was like, well, I need to kind of like learn a bit more. So then I met the person who had done a previous boot camp, and he was working remotely as a developer, and I was like, that sounds like a cool job to do.
Right.
I can maybe, rather than struggling just doing freelance stuff myself, I could get a remote job doing as a developer, and then I'd be able to still like live in Bali and like be paid a salary and not have to like find my own clients and stuff. So I was like, that sounds like a cool thing to do. So I actually then decided to do a taster session for one of the boot camps instead, because I thought I don't want to dive headfirst into this unless I kind of know I'm really going to enjoy it. So I did a website in a weekend boot camp where I spent time sort of building. I think we built 3 websites over a weekend.
Wow.
Just like homepages, like learning like different skills to do that. But it was really fun, and I thought, yeah, I really enjoyed the creativity as well as sort of like learning all the new stuff for like HTML and CSS. So
Did you think, because obviously you said you were going into it with like a bit of CSS, do you think that helped, or do you think CSS is something you could just pick up, and if you hadn't have had that before, you'd have still loved it?
I definitely think CSS is something you can pick up. I think like I only knew some very sort of basic things. I didn't really have a good understanding of it. I kind of was just kind of like, what what do I need to do? I need to change the button color. Let's try and find a bit of that CSS from the internet. You know, there wasn't really like a background knowledge to it. So I definitely think it's something you could pick up. HTML and CSS are both like fairly logical. I think there's like a good like a sort of consistent structure to them. So sort of once you learn the syntax, you can kind of apply it fairly easily, I think. So.
And I think one of the things as well about, I think that's probably the level that I got to as well, where it's kind of like, because you can just Google everything at that point. And actually, spoiler alert, I'm sure we're going to talk about the fact that when you become a developer, you're still just Googling everything.
Yeah.
But that is sort of embedding that skill straight off, isn't it? Of like, actually, no, I want to do this thing, and that curiosity, I think, is so important going into this world. So we sort of picked up the story that actually you're in Bali, you're a freelancer at this time. Like, what is that your background? Have you always been in marketing? Have you always been in, you know, sort of that area of the world? Or
no, so I used to be a paramedic. Actually, I worked for the NHS as a paramedic, and a very short story. I had a car accident and I had to have an operation on my spine, so I then couldn't do that job anymore. And I sort of initially kind of jumped around a bit between other like office-based jobs and other sort of jobs slightly remote related to healthcare, but none of them I just was really not enjoying any of them. Although having said that, one of them I had to build the website for the company and make a logo because it was such a small team and they didn't have one, so it kind of did ignite that initial sort of spark that maybe that could be something I would do. And even though it was absolutely terrible website, now looking back, it definitely kind of, you know, gave me some inspiration. So yeah, I used to be a paramedic and then various other little jobs. And then once I built that first website, I thought, maybe this is something I want to do. And I did do some online courses then in like branding and web design to kind of like get me started in the freelance world. So
so you already, a couple of things there is like you'd already found that, you know, continual learning was something you wanted to do. But I think the other thing that I just wanted to pick up on is like everyone goes back to their first thing that they've ever built and gone, oh, that is so terrible. But it was like, that was what was good at the time, right? And I think that there's something in that, isn't there, of like, it's okay to accept that the first thing you do is going to be bad, because you laugh about it like now.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, if you've got to be bad at everything when you start. Like, no one starts something and is excellent straight away. Like, it's and I think it's a real problem for a lot of people that we start new things and we don't like feeling like we're bad at stuff. So it then like puts you off, doesn't it? And you think, oh, I'm not going to bother because I'm feeling really insecure or bad about the fact that I'm not immediately excellent at this.
You know, it sounds like we've like planned all of this out. We definitely haven't planned that out, but it's just such a really important point, because we always say to people that come onto a boot camp and are learning something new, it's like, you're gonna have those days where you feel like, I've absolutely, like, oh, this is all, I've got this is fine. And then the next day you'll come in and it'll be like, we're just going to change this up a little bit. And you're like, what? And you feel that really, like, that doesn't ever go away, does it, being a developer?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Definitely doesn't. I think it's part of the job is just like starting to accept that you are always going to feel like you don't really know what you're doing. Just because the industry changes so quickly and the tech stacks change so quickly, and it's just constantly learning new things and like being okay with that.
Yeah, and being comfortable in that space of uncertainty is a skill in of its own, isn't it? So some transferable skills coming in there, right? From your background into you know, oh my goodness, this thing is happening, what do I need to do? To, oh my goodness, this thing has changed, what do I need to do? And I'm sure we'll pick on that in a bit, but you chose to do a boot camp over university, and I think you said that's because you knew someone. Is that the main reason? Is kind of like someone else had done it, or had you decided that going back to university wasn't you? Like, how did you decide that actually? Because you'd also done self-study, right? So it's like, why was self-study over a boot camp not the way that you decided to go?
I decided that I wanted to do a boot camp because I wanted to have the structure that it provided, where I was sort of going somewhere every day and there was somebody who was telling me this is what you need to learn to do this job. So it wasn't me sort of having to like rummage around on the internet trying to find, you know, what's the correct thing to learn. So I really needed that. And I also kind of had to take a moment to be sort of self-aware about my learning style. And I know if I'd have done like self-directed learning on the internet, it would have just taken me ages, and I would have probably, you know, got frustrated and ended up like taking big breaks, or, you know, quit altogether. So I knew I wanted to do something where it was like, it's going to be intense, but you're going to get from here to here, and by the end of it you're going to know sort of a certain level of content, so, and have a certain level of skill. So that was the main reason that I chose the boot camp. And then this particular boot camp I chose because it was one of the only ones that was starting to be in person again, because I did mine just after COVID, and I really wanted sort of like the social aspect of it as well, where you're sitting with other people who are there to kind of better themselves and like learn as well, because that was like a big part of the fun of it as well, that sort of social aspect. And I got to make some like lifelong friends from it as well. So
I was literally going to ask, like, do you still speak to people who were on your course and be like, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah, definitely. And we were all sort of really supporting each other when we were trying to get our first jobs, and sort of you know, helping with technical questions and things. And yeah, that was one of my friends, like he phoned me as soon as he got his first job, really excited, and like was telling me all about it. So yeah, it was really great.
And I think that is the social aspect. I think for me as well, I did some self-paced learning after I actually went to university, after leaving uni, and then went back and did my master's in person, and that was actually before COVID. And I was like, I think that the social aspect now is probably the most important thing for me, because I still speak to other people, like you say, and I think that it's amazing to see other people's careers and how they progress, and also just be able to get advice on things as well, because as you say, technically all the time I hear and we see, so we've got like channels where people can show and tell and stuff like that. It's like that community aspect is just, it's really rich, it's really empowering, it's really supportive. And especially that through the bootcamp you'll find that different people have different skills in different areas, front end, back end, design, whatever it is. So I think that's super important. But you touched on sort of going into the job there. Sorry, actually, I'm going to go back a step just onto the challenges, because you've talked about the amazing things of a boot camp socially, but a boot camp's hard, right?
Yeah, honestly, it was probably the hardest thing I've done.
Wow.
It was intense, and I don't know particularly about yours. Yours might be structured differently, but ours was quite like a lot of stuff in a very short space of time. So it feels like you've just been bombarded by information, and that you can't possibly take in all the information that is coming at you. But and actually, but we had like homework to do prior to the course, so that we were doing some basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I started doing the JavaScript homework, and I was like, I have made a terrible mistake. Like,
what have I done?
I need to get my money back. Like, this is I can't do this.
Wow.
Like, honestly, JavaScript, when I first started it, I was like, this is never going to make sense to me.
Wow.
So I had a really like tough time the first like couple of weeks before my boot camp, thinking, oh, is this the right thing? Am I ever going to understand? But I'm really glad I persevered.
It's like, by the way, it does end well.
It does end well. But honestly, yeah, when I first started trying to learn JavaScript, I was like, this is, yeah, it made no sense. So
how did you get
through?
How did you get through that time of looking at it, going like, I just can't do this? How did you? Was it because of the money? Was it because of, you know, what was it?
I mean, part of it was the money. Part of it was sort of just having to have a word with myself that, you know, I'm like, you're a smart person, you can do this. Like, you know, you just need to keep giving it a go. And I kind of told myself it's okay just to try and remember one new thing about it a day. Let's just go through it and try and see if you remember anything from yesterday that you did. And just sort of slowly, it's like little bits started to stick, like with like variables and loops and things. And I thought, okay, I'm finally getting like little concepts. And I think just because JavaScript is so massive, I had this idea in my head that I was like, I have to learn it all, and I have to know it all, and I have to be able to, like, you know, type it out immediately, like if anybody asks. But that's just not the case at all. So
there's a couple of things to pick up in that, but it's like, I think the key one there is like, that's never the case. It comes
Yeah.
back to, if you can't remember how to do something, you just Google it, right?
Yeah,
So,
definitely. I spend a lot of time on Google.
yeah, because what one of my friends who's been a developer a long time, and they said to me, there was a time that there was this language that they used, and I can't remember what it was, but it was like, it had like 32 commands or something. It's like, now that language has 3,200 variable commands. It's like, so you could, in the day, you'd know exactly what to do because you could only do certain things. It's like, now it's impossible to know everything that a language does, and JavaScript is one of the languages in a tech stack of many languages. So I think having that realization and being kind to yourself about that as well is super important. But you sort of touched on, you got given homework before you started, but I'm pretty sure it was pretty intense through as well. Like, how much of your day were you committing whilst on that?
All of it. So we were at school from 9 till 6, and we had an hour break for lunch and 2 15-minute tea breaks, and then every evening we had homework that had to be done for the next day. So I would often be spending like from 6 till midnight sometimes if it was taking me a long time to do the homework.
Wow.
So it was really intense. And then the same at the weekends. Like I generally would only have sort of like one day off, and then the other day I would be doing like parts of projects and parts of the homework to make sure that it was done for Monday as well. So it was really intense, but I did learn a lot, and it pushed me and taught me that I can do these hard things as well, like, and just to sort of trust myself that I'm slowly sort of picking it up. And yeah, there was times where, as you said, I kind of felt like I'm never going to understand, I'm never going to get this, but it did just slowly build week on week on itself, on the topics, and slowly started to come together. So
I mean, it obviously works out because of where you are now, right? But
there we are.
it's like, I think it's fine. It does all work out. It does all work out. Yeah. How did you land your first developer job after the bootcamp? So you've gone through this homework thing of like, oh my goodness, this intensive. How many weeks was it? 10 or 12 or 10 intensive weeks. And now you've got the knowledge. You've got the certificate at the end. Is like, what did you do then?
So there was a group of people that came into our boot camps all last week that were offering free internships to people.
Awesome.
So I initially applied for one of those, and they sort of like did interviews with people and then picked people. Which one was good for practicing interviews?
Yeah, right.
For starters. So yeah, I did an interview for them, and then got this internship for a month, which I think really helped just give me insight into what it's like to work as part of a development team, like look at code bases that have already been built, so it's not something I've just been building from scratch like in the bootcamp, in the projects, and get over that initial terror of Git errors and stuff like that when you're trying to like
or even just reading like someone else's code base, right? Because it's like, that's not how I would have done it.
No,
understanding what they're doing.
So I did that first, and that kind of gave me something to put on my CV as well when I'd started applying for jobs, that I kind of done something at least that was in a company. And then I applied for a lot of jobs. And I think one of the things that really helped me was kind of like the networking aspect, like talking to people, like connecting with people through LinkedIn, and connecting to people from previous cohorts of my bootcamp that already worked for companies, because the company I ended up getting a job for, one of the girls from the previous cohort worked there, and they had like a referral scheme for like new staff, so she was able to put my name forward and like sort of flag me as a potential person, even though I had actually already applied for the company and I was already sort of in the process, but just having somebody who was already in the company know who I was, and be able to kind of like put a face to the name and say, oh, she came and met me in person at the boot camp and had chatted to me on LinkedIn, so she was able to kind of say I was a real person, say that I seemed nice, say that I seemed
I've met them, they're a real person.
Exactly.
Which is always handy. But you said there, and I just want to sort of draw that out, you said you applied for a lot of jobs, and I think
Mhm.
one of the things that in this industry is difficult, because you sort of come out and you're like, I've got these new skills. Like, I'm not saying I'm amazing, but I'm definitely saying I've got these skills and I can do the job. And then there's this sort of, for some people it's longer, for some people it's shorter, but there's that period of rejection where you can be sending off these CVs and you're hearing nothing back. How did you sort of cope with that? Was it a long time? Was it a short time? Was it stressful? Was it fine? How was that?
It was stressful, and like, no one likes being rejected. It's never nice,
Right.
and especially in this industry, like often you'll send off CVs and just won't hear anything back, so you don't really get any feedback as to sort of what it is that
Yeah.
isn't working for you. But it was so I finished the boot camp in April, and then I went back to Bali in May to have a job
Right.
hunt from Bali instead in the sunshine, and I started a job that I got in September. So yeah, so it took a few months,
Yeah.
but part of that was just sort of going through interview processes, sort of,
Yeah.
because often they take a bit of time. It's not usually like you do one interview and that's it, you start the next week. It's normally like a couple of months of like a couple of interviews. So yeah, and also out of all the ones that I applied to, and my current job, like the jobs that I've got, I've ended up getting because I've like networked. So I've known
Right.
somebody somehow or made connections with somebody somehow in the real world, rather than just been sort of like a stranger that they don't know and they haven't got any sort of connection to. I think if you can manage to put yourself in front of them somehow, whether it is through LinkedIn or other networking things, it does sort of help with the process.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in there, isn't it? It's the first one is dealing with rejection and understanding rejection, or even the lack of rejection, just the silence.
Yeah.
Because that is so hard, and I see it with students a lot, and I find it frustrating. Of just that silence is so difficult to tell people that this is normal and it's not personal. I mean, it must feel personal, and it does feel personal, but it isn't. And I think normalizing that and sort of your experience of that is really powerful, because so many people go through that and experience that, and they do feel that it's like, oh, everyone else is getting rejected or at least getting feedback, but it's majoritively not true.
No.
And I think
No.
the second point there as well, which is just so important for me, is how in a world where, I don't want to say everyone's got the same skills as you, because that's not true, but from an employment company, there's there's a lot of competition. How do you stand out? And your networking approach there is the thing, right? It's like, how do I find that thing to just make me 1% more employable to that person? And
Yeah,
that is,
definitely.
it's not easy. Like, what do you have any tips on how you went about that?
Yeah, so I think I definitely use LinkedIn a lot, and we had quite a good process after our boot camp. Like there was like a week of it that was dedicated to job hunting. So they gave us some tools and things for tracking what jobs we'd applied to, and we were really encouraged throughout it to like update our LinkedIn and put our LinkedIn through sort of testers to make sure it was hitting all the right markers and keywords and things. So that was good. And then just connecting with people at companies who you were really interested in working for, and then sort of starting to comment with thoughtful replies on things that they were posting that you were interested in, and just sort of that way you're on their radar, so that when you
Exactly.
do, maybe you're not doing it sort of like popping into their, or like messaging them and emailing them like
Yeah.
directly, being really like aggressive and like, hey, me, like I'm the best. But just sort of adding thoughtful comments or saying things in reply to stuff that they're posting, sharing things and stuff, then that can help.
Just yeah, I'd agree. Just like generally, just being active and engaged with that company and those people, because you sort of put it out there, and it does. I think you're right. It does eventually come around. You don't have to be like, "Hey, give me a job."
Yeah.
You can go for it if you want. I mean, that's a vibe. I'm not saying it's the vibe, but it definitely is one. So no, it's really interesting. I think you're right. Just being active and around there. So you've done your boot camp. You've got your first job. Um, Tell us about, like, okay, I'm into the job. I'm into the experience, and not probably not so much on like the, you know, hey, you're using all the skills you know at the boot camp, but like at that point, what soft skills do you think you had to bring into that? And what soft skills do you wish you developed more when you're going into that? Of like, this is a new job and a new experience.
So the good thing about the job that I got is that it was they put all their new developers into an academy. So
Oh
there
wow.
was sort of technically there was like a year's worth of you being like an academy like graduate engineer. So you
Wow.
were sort of got additional support, and the first month of it was additional training. So we went for a week where everyone was together in Leeds, and we were all doing projects together and learning how to like work as a team on projects and things like that. So
Really
it gave us a really good foundation for sort of how it is actually realistically working in teams with other people who have got different opinions and are doing different things, without it being an actual client project where we could do any damage, you know. So so that was really good. And I think that was one of the big things that I sort of had to not had to, because I'm generally quite good at working in a team, but like often you can have opinions on the ways you think things should be done, but if you're working as part of a team, it's really important that you've got to like take on board everyone else's opinions as well, and sort of come to sort of some sort of compromise on things, and also just communication skills about repeatedly asking questions until you kind of understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think quite often, especially when you're new as a developer, you're keen to like jump in and start doing the coding, but actually most of the issue, or most of the what you should be doing, is figuring out how you're going to solve it before you actually start doing anything. So so that was a big part for me, not just been like, oh, we've only got 2 hours, we better just start coding. No, it's like I'd rather spend an hour of the time figuring out what we're going to do and planning it out, and then an hour executing it properly. So so communication skills, teamwork, and sort of like collaborating with others, they were definitely ones that I had to work on, try and get better at. So
I just think that's such an amazing experience as well. Like a new company being able to give you that opportunity to do that. I mean, that sounds like a great thing for them to have done. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good foot in the door for me as well, and it kind of gave me that cushion from going from a boot camp into a job where it wasn't just I was immediately expected to be producing. Like I got a sort of a bit of a buffer of time where they were like, no, we're happy you're still learning and still developing, and we're going to kind of give you additional support to make you feel comfortable until you're at the point where we're happy you've got skills that are going to help us as well as have helped you. So,
and I think there is that fear, isn't there, of going into an experience of, I think we all have that. I want to go in and I want to do something, but then also there is that real fear of like, I've not done this before, especially because generally, people are coming from, like you say, they're bringing transferable skills, but you are coming into a new industry. So I think that's just a really nice way of them to go about that, really, and give you that space. And I think it's reassuring for people to hear as well that I don't think there are many roles as a new junior developer where you are expected. Some people might, but I very much doubt that anyone's like, here's our code base, go have fun with it. Like there'll always be that hand holding, right? I mean, even in your second job, I imagine they didn't, you weren't, or were you expected to go change it?
No. And for my second job, like I didn't even know the tech stack that I'd never used Vue before. So for my technical challenge, I had to learn Vue and like submit something in a new framework that I hadn't done before. So and then it definitely was just supportive environment, and it's a great company to work for anyway, so they've always been sort of supportive, and like I've got a really good mentor in my manager, so he's happy looking at my code or like pair programming with me or giving me that support, and even in my first job we did a lot of pair programming together, which I think was really valuable, sort of being able to see how other people would do stuff, and having to sort of like collaborate in that way as well, where like you might be typing, but you're typing what someone else wants you to type, or you're having to work with somebody else rather than it just being your own like stuff in isolation. So
I think that's those pair programming situations are great because it can be lonely. Right? Coding can be lonely. So to hear, I think sometimes when people are on a boot camp, they sort of think like things like pair programming is like we're doing that so that people, so it's easier to manage smaller group stuff. It's like no, that's actually should happen in a work environment,
Hmm.
and you're really bringing people, into the industry to do that.
Hmm.
But we talked about transferable skills, but out of those ones you said sort of communication, collaboration, would you say they were the most important ones that you bought? Because the thing to me is always is I think a lot of people come in and they're so worried about that code, and they don't realize that actually it's the other things that they're bringing are important. Would you say
Hmm.
it was those two that are the most important, or was there something else you brought to the table, do you think?
Um, I think people skills are really important. Just being sort of able to chat to people and um, being sort of friendly and open, and that gets you a long way in any team. Where
Yeah.
if people feel like they can relate to you and that you're, you know, generally like a positive person, that you're there just sort of trying your best and want to kind of get involved and get to know people, that definitely helps. Um, I think problem solving in general is just a really important skill as a developer. I think you also have to be able to communicate with clients as well on a way that they can understand. That's also something that I had to sort of learn how to do, so that you're not sort of trying to explain things at too like technical level. So yeah, but I definitely do think communication gets you, like good communication skills get you a long way in this industry. Like something that often gets like forgotten about, but it's really important.
And I think the other thing for me there is you talked about problem solving skills. I think just an accept within problem solving, an acceptance that you're not going to know the answer straight away. We kind of touched on this a
Mm,
few times in the talk, right? Of just like it's okay to not know something. It's okay to not, and it's your approach. I think finding that balance between not giving up too soon on the problem,
mhm.
but also not burning yourself out on the problem, and
Yeah.
finding that balance is really hard, right? It's
It
like
definitely is. And I think like resilience is probably an important skill,
yeah,
because you're
totally.
going to be frustrated a lot of the time. You know, it's like it's just part of the job, that with it, or the nature of solving problems and fixing
Yeah,
bugs and things like that. It's just it can be really frustrating. But I think everyone has their own ways of dealing with that and their own ways that work best for their own brain. So like quite often I'll like need to take a break and I'll go for a walk and come back to something, so that I've had sort of time to decompress, and rather than sitting there stressing trying to hammer the problem, like just taking a break and going away and coming back to it is something that definitely works for me.
and how often on that time that you've taken away have you gone, oh, that's what I need to do. That's the
Yeah,
answer.
yeah, that's usually what happens. I'm normally
Right.
like, oh, like I'll go to bed and then I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh no, there's a comma somewhere. Like I finally like seen it in my brain. I've like added an extra comma somewhere or something. Um, yeah, it's
Self.
when you let your brain relax, and sort of stop thinking about it, that then
Yeah.
the answers tend to come.
I mean, you can't just do that, but yes, you have got to spend time. But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think
Yeah.
um, We've got a few more questions that I'd like to run through, but I would like to open it up to everyone in chat as well. If you've got any questions, please, I'll moderate them and drop them into the chat. But what um, what advice would you give to someone that's thinking, I kind of like the industry. I, how do I get into it? And I'm thinking about doing a boot camp. Should I do it? What would your advice to those people be?
I think it's definitely good to do a taster session or something first, just to give you an idea of whether it's something you're going to enjoy. Um, because it's hard to know, like it's not really something you can sort of test out otherwise. You
Right.
just have to go by yourself. So I think it's good to do one of the taster sessions, and that should hopefully give you a bit of clarity whether it's something you enjoy. And then yeah, I think if you can, like, it's a great way to do it. And it it is intense, but also like you'll feel great at the end of it. It's such an achievement to go through the course and like achieve like such a great amount in such a small time. So yeah, I'm so glad that I did it, and I don't think anyone that did one would regret it.
And was the job what you expected it was? The other side going into it, or as
Uh,
it like on? I didn't think I was going to be doing this.
No, I think I probably expected there to be more coding. um,
That is such
I
a great
think,
answer.
yeah,
Turns out this whole coding thing, I don't really do much of
yeah.
that coding stuff.
No,
Oh,
I don't
really?
actually do that much of it. Um, I do code, but there's also a lot of sort of meetings and planning and research and like learning concepts and stuff, as opposed to just me sitting there all day, every day, writing in VS Code. That's like,
Yeah.
you know, at best probably, 2 or 3 hours a day I probably spend in VS Code.
Oh,
The
wow.
rest is on other things. So
And I think that variety is nice, right? Because I think if you were just, I imagine there are some developers that do just do that, but it's good that it's a little bit more varied. I don't think I could
mm,
just be in VS Code for 8 hours a day. I think that would be.
yeah, and I think that the great thing about being or the role as a developer is that there's so many different roles that you can do. It's like you could be a product engineer, you could be a front end, you could do back end, and then even within those there's so many different varieties of role within different companies. And it was really important to me to find a role that I could do remotely, so I could work from anywhere, and I have that flexibility in my hours that I can work sort of what hours I want, sort of a day, as long as the work's getting done. And not all jobs like that. Some of them you're there from 9 to 5 and you've got sort of
Yeah.
set hours, but it's important to kind of know that there are different options out there, and you can like look for roles that fit with your personal preference as well.
So it was going back to sort of like the motivation of being able to do it remotely. Then that was the motivation, and now you are living that motivation, right?
Yes, exactly. And when I first decided to go and do the boot camp, I was like, I'm going to give myself a year to do the boot camp, get a job, and get back to Bali, like working remotely. I was like, that's the goal. It took me about 18 months, but I got there. So, yeah, and yeah, it was a really good achievement. So,
Achieve the goal. What one of the questions just come in, and I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm going to ask it. How is working at Contento? Like, how do you find you like?
oh no, is it one of my bosses?
No.
Yeah, no, it's great. Honestly, like I've got such a good team of people that are all. We're a startup, so we're a small team, but that's been really nice because it means that we all know each other on like a really personal level, and everybody's really supportive with each other. So, and we've also got sort of flexibility, and it's very sort of life first, work second kind of company.
Right.
So anything that comes up life wise that's important, it's okay to deal with that first, which you don't get in a lot of companies. So that's been
No.
really nice.
That's awesome. I did think that you might say something. Aaron has asked. So you talked about acquiring commercial experience and doing an internship. Like, how would you just approach companies for that? Because I think you said that they were laying that on, right?
Yeah, so it was something that was I think there was probably 2 or 3 companies that came in and were sort of offering internships to people. So I didn't actually have to go and look for that myself, which I'm grateful for. But I do see them out there on LinkedIn as options. There's also like hackathons and things like that going on that you can sort of volunteer to join in. So I think anything like that where it's just showing you're proactively still trying to learn and get involved in things would be like a good alternative as well.
And some internships are paid and some internships are
Mm-hmm.
unpaid, right? So it's like there is a variety of internships, and going in and giving yourself that opportunity is good. I think you're absolutely right on the hackathon thing. But I think the underlying message is really, really important, which is don't stop coding,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's really easy when you've sort of done that to sort of have a big breathe out and give yourself some time. But I think definitely
Mm-hmm.
going and keeping your, because that's where you lose those skills, right? You've
Yeah,
learned them in 10 weeks, you can easily lose them again in 10 weeks, which is one of
yeah,
the issues,
sure,
right?
for sure.
What do you wish you'd known before starting the boot camp? Like, was there anything you're like, I wish I would have known that because I'd have done this, or maybe I'd have taken it a different direction about that? Or do you think it's kind of you went into it with eyes open?
I definitely didn't go in eyes open, but I think I wish it was a shock. But yeah, I wish I'd known that you didn't need to memorize everything, because
Right.
I very much thought that that was what the job was. Like, you have to know all the different types of like languages, and you have to know how to like code them at a moment's notice. Like, someone's gonna sit and look over your shoulder and make you type out something, and you have to be able to do it. But it couldn't be further from that in actual real life. So that would have taken a lot of stress off my brain, I think, if I had known that I didn't need to be like memorizing sort of specific syntax, and that it was just more sort of concepts and understanding how you're solving problems and manipulating data with certain concepts, and that all those concepts are generally the same across any language. Like, they apply to all the languages, that you just do them in slightly different ways. So that would have taken a lot of the fear away, I think, if I'd have known that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I think it is one of the most relevant points of, even the most senior developers don't know those things and shouldn't know those things. It's like, it's the logic and the approach, right, which makes it different. When you were applying for roles, so how many jobs were you applying for a day, and how did you keep yourself motivated through that time?
So I think I probably applied for about 70 jobs in total, but I think I only heard back from 3 of those.
Wow.
It wasn't a lot, and some of them send the general like rejection email and things, but like yeah, so one of them I had an interview for, which actually was off the back of the internship. So
Oh, wow.
the one of the guys in the internship had a friend who was a CTO in a company, and he sort of put me forward as a recommendation because he'd like said I'd been good to work with on the internship. So he'd sort of done me a favor and put me forward for that. So
Networking again.
So that one wasn't my cup of tea in terms of the industry it was in, but yeah. So I forgot what the question was.
How many you applied for,
applied for, yes.
How did you manage rejection or lack of rejection?
Yeah, so I did apply for a lot, and it was really hard, but I think because I'd applied, one of the ones that I'd applied for that I got in the end, I'd applied for quite early on. So I had that one kind of like rolling throughout the process, applying for all the others. And so that was kind of giving me a little bit of hope that maybe I'd sort of at least get one option. Yeah, it is hard, and like,
It really is.
It's not an enjoyable process. I don't think anybody really enjoys job hunting, but you just got to know that you just got to keep persevering, you've got to keep applying, and you've got to keep sort of tweaking what you're doing and seeing, whether you get better results with it. Definitely. And also asking for feedback, if you do get into the process and you do an interview with someone and then you don't get the job for whatever reason, it's always okay to ask for feedback to see what it is that you can sort of do better for next time. So
yeah, and that is the thing, it's like, is when you are in that process, exactly right, isn't it? It's taking every opportunity to learn, and I think Zainab's sort of saying here, it's like that intern experience helped when you got the first job because you had that experience. But yeah, did that help? Do you think that internship experience, do you think that helped ease the job search, or were you just like, when you went into the internship, did you throw yourself into it and say that the job search will come later?
Yeah, so I kind of just threw myself into it and was focusing on that. I still was applying for or keeping an eye out for jobs that were sort of ones that I wanted. And also I think it took me a bit of time to kind of figure out what kind of jobs I wanted to apply for, because there's so many that you could apply for, and I was like, I don't really know what interests me and like what I would actually enjoy doing as a job. So I think I took a couple of weeks of just kind of going through jobs that were available and looking at the spec and looking at where the company was, what sort of things they produce, and thinking, would I enjoy doing that? Rather than it just being kind of like a scramble for like any job that will take me. I was like, I kind of like want to consciously try and work for a company where the culture is going to be good, they're working on projects that I think are going to be interesting, and also that have got a good sort of career path or like learning opportunities, and that looks like they really were like a supportive environment and wanted to kind of like develop their staff, because that was really important to me as well.
And when you've gone from job one to job two, we always say Now, I'm not going to say that because then I'm leading the question, but was that an easier jump? Was it the same experience? Was it the same market? How was that experience going from job one to job two different or the same?
It it was definitely an easier jump. I don't think it's
Right?
definitely easier to get a job when you've got a job,
Yeah.
and when you've got the actual real world experience as well. Because a lot of the job isn't actually the coding part; it's all the other bits that fit around the coding and like how things are, you know, how everything's managed, and how all the team stuff as well. So being able to learn all that on a job means you've then got that to say you can do for the next one, and it's then a skill that they're
Yeah.
not having to teach you. But yeah, no, it was definitely easier. And again, it my second job came down to networking, and I actually quit my first job and
Right.
didn't have a job.
I really.
And I messaged someone I know from my network, been like, haha, like I quit my job. And they were like, oh, actually, we might need somebody. That's really
There you
good
go.
timing, you know, and that's how it kind of worked out. So yeah, at the time, I just messaged him as a joke, being like, what an idiot I've been because I've quit my
Yeah.
job.
But apparently not. See?
But apparently not, it worked out. So yeah.
Exactly. And I always think the world, what the world works in that way. You know,
Hmm.
like sometimes things are just supposed to happen. But
Yeah.
you've got to put yourself out there for that to be able to be possible.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to say, so we're coming up to time now, and I just wanted to say it's just so empowering to hear, or I hope it's so empowering, and it's so great for me to sit here and all of the things that we tell people about how you're going to apply for loads of jobs but you won't hear back and it's not personal, that
Yeah.
you know getting that first job is the hardest step and the second one is easier, you know, telling people that you know that all of those transferable skills that you're bringing into the role is as if not more valuable than having the coding experience. The coding is kind of the hiding factor. It's everything else you wrap around it. It's just so important. And I just wanted to thank you so much for your time for doing that,
No, you're
because
welcome.
you know if we can say it 1,000 times and hopefully it lands, but just hearing you say it and hearing your experience is just so powerful and impactful, and I just wanted to thank you for that. So Hollie, I'm gonna sign off now. If anyone's got any other questions, they can send them to me in Discord, and if that's okay with you, Hollie, I'll send them over just to get
Yeah, sure, great.
yeah, just people just saying thank you so much, insightful. Zainab has been, yeah, enjoying this one, so thank you so much. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today. I
No
know
worries.
I know you've got a meeting coming up as well, so
Yeah.
I shall say